Hello? Testing? 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 Hello? Testing? Hmm. Test? Test? Hmm. Mm. Hello? All right, guys. Y'all can unmute. There is a delay. So I'm not quite sure how to turn off that delay, but I'm gonna see here. Okay. Oh, here we are.
Hello.
All right, I'm gonna shut off the stream because that's making me. All right, I think we're. Whew, here we go. I think All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our first creator collaborative cast for One Page Rules. Really appreciate Mr. Warboss Fitz, Mr. One Page More, and Chris from Good Enough Gaming. Really great to have you guys on. Yeah. How you guys doing? Mr. Warboss, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Just out here in the garage, about 95 degrees. And I decided to set the camera up because people always ask me where I keep the armies. Ta-da! It's the wall.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And oh, nice. So we're gonna try to. This is the first time I've ever set up any of this, so I'm sure I can probably turn off the delay. But so I've had to like shut off my original channel because it's sort of very wonky to see myself talk and then wait like a few minutes. All right. Anyway, thank you so much, Mr. Warburg. Mr. One Page More, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm having a grand old time. Let's see if this works.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah. I've been playing around seeing if I can make this frog thing work. We'll see if it's too distracting.
Do I get any like credit or something? Because I found that little froggy in your high elf fleets. So do I?
You should get some credit. I need to hide more frogs in my videos, frankly.
Well, we're really great to have you on. We actually just posted Any War Game. We just posted our podcast with you. It actually happened Tuesday, but it happened a little bit ago. It was just it's just a busy week trying to make sure all of this worked. But thank you so much for coming on. And Chris from Good Enough Gaming, man, how are you doing? Muted if you're talking.
Muted.
Chris. Oh. Chris, you there? Okay, we'll get back to Chris. We will get back to Chris. All right, and thanks everyone for joining us. We see we've got some people. Appreciate everyone's patience. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever done any of this streaming, then connecting it to YouTube and all this stuff. So with that in mind, let's just go around and let's just. Oh wait. Okay, let me just make sure. Okay. Chris may be leaving and coming back. Of course, got a little testing, a little audio issues, but we'll get there. So, with that in mind, let's just go around and if Chris leaves, he'll come back. Let's just do a little introduction for ourselves. Mr. Warboss, which I think, not that this really needs a lot of introductions, but I guess it would be a good place to start. All right.
Okay. Introductions. Oh, hi. I'm the smooth brain idiot that plays how to play games every week. Just here in the garage. I don't know what else you want me to say.
Yeah. So what are some things that you do on your channel? Some sort of specialties, I think that you're sort of like an all-arounder, I guess, but anything
Kind of. I'm going through all of the Grimdark Future and the Age of Fantasy armies, kind of giving an overview on all of them, making an army, showing how they play, giving advice on what could go where, how things work in the army, and then playing a battle report at the end of it.
Nice.
That's the big thing that I do on the weekends, and then I do have a show that I do on Wednesdays. Not really a show, but I put out another video on Wednesdays usually, which is just random, whatever I come up with, just to throw out there. You know, usually only 100 people watch those, which I'm cool with. Some of that stuff is kind of, but there you go.
It's 100 awesome people, though. That's the
Yeah.
you know, quality over quantity. Quality over quantity. All right. Thanks so much, Chris. How you doing, man? Testing.
I'm finally here.
Hey, Chris. Good to have
Hey.
you on. All right. Good deal. Well, Chris, we were just sort of going through some introductions. So, Chris, just go ahead and go ahead and just introduce yourself to anyone who hasn't maybe seen some of your work. We'll be posting links to all the channels down here. But yeah, go ahead, Chris. Just tell us a little bit about sort of what you've been doing.
Okay. Back in August, I started up Good Enough Gaming. Initially, it was going to be kind of open to whatever tabletop game I was playing, the flavor of the week, so to speak. But I really kind of narrowed in on the one-page rules stuff. And ever since then, it's been painting, bat reps, reviews, and commentary, just whatever comes up.
Nice. Great to have you on, Chris. And Mr. One Page Moore showing us all up with the dancing frog. How you doing, Mr. One Page Moore?
I'm doing good. One Page Moore. I do a little bit of everything, but it's mostly focused on lore on my channel. Working on quite a few projects right now, but it comes down to lore breakdowns and extended lore videos and a lot of trying to make my own stories good enough so other people are willing to listen to them. So that's kind of who I am.
You're going to have to tell us how you do that animation thing there, because I want the little yellow face I have here bouncing around smirking at people.
Sure.
I know. Okay, well, that's great. Well, so for myself, I'm Daniel over at Nexus Wargaming. I started doing YouTube for just general wargaming, and I think towards the end of last year, I sort of focused a lot more on OPR, and I guess I sort of focused more on the competitive side, more of like the wargaming side. I want to do more hobby stuff, but I found that like whatever limited time I have between playing games is sort of the actual YouTubing itself sort of takes control of, but I do want to get back into some hobbying when I can. I think all of us are trying to just fit this into our real life. I think, so I'm just hoping my daughter doesn't come and just like ram on the door at any moment, and be like, "Hey!" But no, it's great everyone's come on. Let me just get through some of the comments and make sure we're not missing any questions. So appreciate everyone helping us with the mic check here. We've got it's good. Yeah, it's really good that we got all together. So we do have Andy over at Spymaster was supposed to come on, but he's busy sort of organizing the tournament next week, which I'm actually going to go to. So I'm going to go to England. Me and Boz, we're going to go to that tournament, and I'm just going to show those. I'm going to show those Brits how you win a war game. So. So yeah, that's going to be fun. But he did, with that all in mind, he did burn through all his hobby credits this week with the wife, so he's not going to be able to come on. We all know that. All right, and yeah, same thing. I think that Boz was supposed to come on, and I think we have a couple of us coming on. It's like all things, trying to work it out, but we got the most awesome people here. That's the most important part here. So we got. This is for you, Mr. Warboss. It says, you got me started. Warboss got me started in OPR. This is from Panzer. How does that feel, man? You got this guy. Yeah, you got him in OPR.
That feels great. That's what I'm trying to do, is to just get more people into the wargaming space. I think OPR is a great way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it too. That's great. Amazing. Yeah, it's really cool to see us all kind of get together here. All right, so we're with that in mind, let's get to a conversation. So we're going to be doing more of these in the future, and they're going to be sort of on different people's channels each time. But so for the first one, we sort of have something we want to talk about, and that is, I think, something that all the OPR community is interested in, and is how do we grow the OPR community? It's growing a lot now. For one, maybe get everyone's opinion. Do we want to, like, for instance, do we want to grow? Is that a good? How much do we want to grow? And if we do want to grow, like, how do we start? What sort of some tactics that we can all sort of talk about, and how to grow our community and where to grow our community. And we could just start off. We'll just go a little round table here, Mr. Warboss. What do you think? You already got one person in PR, so.
Well, I mean, I have a thought. Just try to put it together. Like I said, smooth brain. Getting people into OPR from other war games, I think, like, say, 40K or the Games Workshop products in general, a lot of those people are giving pushback in the past. Now, I'm sure that we all keep one eye on Games Workshop, and I do it every time they screw up. I'm like, hey, guys, over here, look at this.
Yeah.
But another avenue that I want to see us bringing players into this is the people that Games Workshop completely bypassed, like the younger guys coming up, like the 15 to 25, the ones that just look at the prices from Games Workshop and just go, that's not possible. Where in one-page rules you can get into it cheaper because the model agnosticity, whatever the plural of that is, again, orc, and just be able to play with cheaper stuff that you just, I don't want to say just doesn't matter as much, but whenever the models cost pennies to make, if you're not a good painter, you don't have that, like, painter's block of, I don't want to mess up this $100 model because I don't know how to paint. If they're 50 cents a piece, slap paint on it. Just get better through repetition.
I feel you. Okay, that's great. And I think, and I'll just kind of comment. I just saw this video by this guy, and he was like, he just got into wargaming recently to get into his son, and I think it's Square Table Union, and he's puts us some good stuff. But he was talking about how he got into Games Workshop and he was just turned off. I mean, how many people find Games Workshop, get into the hobby, and then just quit? So yeah. Okay. What about Mr. One Page More here? What do you what's sort of your thoughts on all this?
Oh.
Nope. I think Mr. One Page More. Oh, your stream is going a little down.
Hey, can you hear me?
There you
go. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so for me, I was one of the ones that almost bounced off of Games Workshop because of the prices, the lore being denser than like a neutron star, the overall approachability of it was really hard for me. And so through my entire hobby career with wargaming, I've bought 5 gargoyles off of eBay. And then I bought a 3D printer. because I did the math and it just worked out better. But for me, one of the things that, like Warboss said, just the agnostic nature of one-page rules makes it really approachable. So I actually played a game with my 6-year-old daughter where she could grab whatever toys she wanted, and those were her models. And so I used my my Zerg models, and she used a couple of things that I 3D printed for her, and a couple of stuffed animals, and we just played a skirmish game. That was fun. It made it so much more approachable for her in particular. From my standpoint, from getting people into the hobby, it's the transition from the mentality that the wargaming hobby is actually a Warhammer 40K hobby and turning it into the wargaming hobby. Most people don't even know that there is something beyond 40K or Age of Sigmar. There's a huge field of wargaming that can be experienced, and one-page rules is probably one of the best when it comes to welcoming people into that hobby.
Yeah.
And so getting the word out, making people feel like they can come into something without bouncing off of it from a rule standpoint, from a lore standpoint, makes it a lot easier for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. How about Chris? So Chris, this is also sort of your, because you did a lot of work on this too, with like doing a lot of comparisons between, I think that you've done a lot of work about the big introduction of new players for OPR and comparing it to Games Workshop. So what's your sort of take on all this?
So one of the things I noticed when I was still really big into 40K is that huge learning curve. And I remember seeing friends so excited to bring someone into that game, and within a few minutes of them trying to explain all of the intricacies, it was just deer in headlights. And there really is no soft or light entry into it. You kind of have to slam into it as it is, and you either figure it out or you fall away. Whereas with one-page rules, what I liked is it can very easily be scaffolded. So you could take that one page that they have, that core rules, one page front and back, and you could play a game with that. And then you could download the beginner's guide, which has a little bit more. And then you could get the advanced rulebook, which has a little bit more. So wherever you are in that hobby, in that stage of wargaming, it can meet you there. You don't have any models, you don't have any experience, it doesn't matter. You can still play. Whereas to get into something like 40K, there is this gigantic initial investment, and then the learning curve of building and painting and playing. And I saw so many people would come in the store, buy into it because they would see the pre-printed or pre-painted models that other people had, and they'd see how much fun they were having. And they made the mistaken assumption that they could have that within a couple days. So it was really nice to see with one-page rules that whatever level you want to jump in, it can accommodate you. If you're brand new to all wargaming, it can accommodate you. But if you're a veteran wargamer with tons of different kinds of games under your belt, it can still accommodate you there too. So very, very flexible, very, very malleable that way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think I'll make sure you finish up, Chris. I'm sorry. You're saying so much good stuff. I don't want to interrupt you. So.
Oh, no. And I also absolutely agree with one page more about the idea that I think Games Workshop is trying to do, and to a degree they're succeeding, with miniature wargaming. Kind of like when you think of a tissue, you call it a Kleenex, even though Kleenex is a brand. You think of a hot tub, you call it a jacuzzi. That's a brand. But people are starting to think of sci-fi and fantasy wargaming as Warhammer, and I believe that's intentional. So either you play historical or you play Warhammer. And I find that one of the biggest draws One Page Rules has is the fact that you don't have to risk anything to try it out. So take whatever models you have. The rule set is free. I mean, what have you got to lose? Give it a shot. See what you think. It's not like trying to get someone into another game where you're like, well, you got to buy this rule set and you got to get a couple models. And if you play Fantasy Flight, you've got to get another set of new dice and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think one of its biggest selling points is there's no risk at all.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, I think who was in our last pod mentioned Army Man. I think someone was playing. Was it you, Chris? You started off playing with Army Man, I think. Or
well, my son and I, when we played with Legos.
Yeah,
we use Lego figures. I recommend it in one of my videos how with one page rules, if all you have is a $5 bag of army men from the hobby store, that's fine. You can use that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like so for me, I think it's great that we get new players in. I myself, so I think there's sort of two. One I think is great is to get new players. I think first of all that is the ideal, to get players who aren't sort of jaded by games. You know, oh my goodness. I mean, I started playing Warhammer, not you're right, not Wargaming. I started playing Warhammer in the 90s. I think this year is my 30th year playing war games, and the majority of that has been, and I've suffered through so much in my life of just dealing with Games Workshop. I think though as well, like the other side of it is, how do we, first of all, do we as a community want to go after 40K players? And secondly, how do we approach it? Myself, my own personal view on it, I do want to go after 40K players because for one, I mean, you know, I think I want to sort of set, I feel it's like the Matrix almost, right? Where you got these people who they think it's good. And it's like, if you can just show them, you can, and I've taught in my own, you know, teaching, I've been teaching mainly X40K players who just play one game of OPR and they just love it. They just absolutely love it. So, I mean, my view is I would love for us to grow towards closer to, you know, to reach out to those 40K players. But let's get some comments as well. So I thought this was interesting by someone named Test Test, which I'm sure is a real person. But actually, so this person says, I want us to stay niche. Just me and my friends at a local store with a great community of 10 OPR players. And then also he says, they say they use paper minis, which is really cool. Is that so? How about this as a route? So is that a thing that's happening in One Page Rule where the community is big enough that are parts of the community sort of saying, okay, we have enough people, you know, let's not sort of invite others. How do y'all feel about that? I mean, you know.
Yeah, that kind of, it's one of those. I've also heard that that's the best way to play any war game is you get a whole bunch of friends together, like less than 10 friends together. That way that you can always, you have a game, but you keep it contained, that you have your own little meta, that you know the way the game is supposed to be between you guys, which, you know, when I got a group of like dad garage gamers that swing by and play here, and we're all on the same page. There's a couple outliers in there, the guys who want to be super competitive, but we can all kind of stamp that down between all of us. So the games are more fun.
Mm-hmm.
If we went to, you know, the level of 40K, I could see that becoming a giant thing, just the constant push to be super competitive, which if that's what you're into, that's what you're into. It's great. But between, you know, a smaller group of players, just all having the same mindset of playing the game, I think is a good way to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
with Northern Exile, the YouTuber, who fantastic videos. One of his things is he says is 90% of the wargaming hobby is picking who you're playing against. And so even if we, you know, One Page Rules, it balloons out to millions and millions of people, you still need to have your core group or else you're not going to have a fun time. Because that's the same thing that happens with 40K is if you do not pick your matches well and who you're playing with and who you spend your hobby time with, you don't end up having a good time with the hobby.
Yeah,
I think that's one place where right now One Page Rules has the advantage because it's so small and it's not well known. The people who know it are going to share it with their close friends. So they're going to be building those small One Page Rules communities with that group of friends that they like to play with. Whereas when folks come into 40K, their first games are probably at a Warhammer store or a friendly local gaming store, and you have no idea who you're going to run into. You'll meet someone there and like, hey, do you want to play a game? Sure. You don't know if that person's super competitive, if they're brand new, and that again can be an obstacle. Now you could end up meeting, you know, some great people and build the community there. But I think this one, it's nice because it's growing organically and internally. So I think that was an excellent point.
Yeah, I think sometimes 40K players, I think like all players, they're sort of a mixed bag. You're going to get some people who, and I think that's just everyone. I think every war game that we've played, and I think that, you're going to get sort of a different group. I think, to me, this is sort of my thought on it. My own thought is that I used to play War Machine a lot too, and I found the game system itself sort of lent itself to people who were sort of jerks. It's like the system itself you had to sort of be a certain, because it was a game that you couldn't just play casually, and I feel like 40K is becoming more of that. It's actually, to me, driving away people who want to play with tactics and people who want to sort of list build and the super. I don't know. Like, I wonder if you could get some of those 40K players out of that ecosystem, maybe they would be better, right? And then there's other players who are already cool. So anyway, what do y'all think about that opinion? Is it what's that? Is it the chicken before the egg scenario? Is it, which one comes first, I guess?
Yeah. So Test kind of mentions in one of his comments here that he's more of a beer and pretzels war gamer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's One Page Rules has a lot more of that beer or pretzel side, whereas 40K is so gosh dang crunchy that it actually, in the normal game, you're going to gotcha your opponent like 3 or 4 times unless they're constantly up on every other faction's rules.
Yeah.
And so that being caught off guard from the basics of the rules really does not breed goodwill between players. And so where with a lot of other game systems, including One Page Rules, it's simple enough that it's easy to understand what's going on, understand what your opponent's doing, and then being able to engage with them as a human being rather than 2 computers trying to calculate the rules of a game.
Yeah. And does that itself produce a certain sort of, I guess I'm sort of saying sometimes maybe people look at that frog is awesome. We're looking for 40K players, but maybe they are a little bit more of a product of their environment.
Yeah, I've seen it a few different ways. One is the game system is going to attract the player that it attracts the players that respond to the message. So a good example of this is like D&D versus Pathfinder. Mm-hmm. You're going to end up with someone who loves D&D 5th edition is a completely different player than someone who loves Pathfinder 1st or 2nd edition. You're going to get the crunchier player going after Pathfinder. It's going to be a lot more strategic. You're going to get more of the narrative player towards a D&D. Mm-hmm. But in my experience, but with so that's one is Warhammer 40K attracts a particular type of crunchy gamer right now, and it didn't always do that. But there's the other piece of it too, is a bad rule system will turn a good player into a bad player.
Yeah, it will.
And that's what's so important of having your community, because oftentimes in your little group, you're like, oh, that's a stupid rule. We don't use that here. You cut out what will breed like that distrust and that toxicity.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the places where One Page Rules starts with the more basic. Everyone enters on the ground floor, and then if you want to go to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th floor, you can. Mm-hmm. Whereas to get into 40K, you got to go straight to the penthouse. And if you just want to play a simpler game, you can't. All of the complexity is in the rules. You can't, unless you, as you mentioned, you have a small group who's willing to negate entire blocks of the rules, but you can't really do that. Whereas instead, One Page Rules gives you like an empty plate at a buffet and says, go put on it what you want and find other people who want to share that same stuff. Whereas with 40K, they hand you the meal already fixed, and it's like, you got to eat it all.
Yeah. I think you can especially say that with the custom army builder. I mean, the fact that they invested so much into that is so awesome. Oh, Mr. Robots, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, kind of like building on your Matrix comparison. If you look at 40K kind of like the Matrix, the people that started off in a simpler game, like me, I started off at the tail end of second, beginning of third, and then what 40K has become, just like the Matrix, there comes a certain point where the 40K player that's been there a long time wants to unplug from that Matrix. So there's a certain point where the 40K players seek out different rules, and one-page rules just being there, in bright lights, like, hey, check this out, that will attract them on its own. I mean, that's where I came from, because I played 40K for so long, and then prices, rules changes, different war changes, army book changes, constant rules churn. I was like, okay, I'm either out or I'm going to look for something else.
Yeah.
And the similarity helps too, that they can migrate over without a massive change. It can feel like not the same game, but similar enough that they still feel comfortable. So 2 weeks ago, it was the Richmond Open, and I did demo games for at least 2 of the days of the convention there. And everybody who played a game there was a 40K player, said, I've heard of this, and they wanted to check it out. And they all said, this is so much faster. This is so much cleaner, but it still feels like we're playing that kind of a game.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. And I'm just like Warboss. Like I'm second edition, third. And then as it got crazier, I just at one point was like, this is silly. Yeah. All right. So let's some more user comments. Lucas said, my wife and friends started playing OPR when I showed them. You're right. There is no way they would go through a 200-page rule book. But 17 pages, explain that. And it's funny, actually, especially experienced wargamers, you really can just play with one page. Like that's the great thing, is that like an experienced wargamer really can just use the one page and sort of fill in that with your previous wargaming experience. But so Lucas introducing this to his wife and friends, that's pretty awesome. I don't think that I could introduce some of these games to my wife and friends. And I hear some people talk about introducing it to their daughters, Chris, and you can do that. And what do y'all think about that quality to actually get non-war gamers into this? That's so cool.
So I got an amusing. Oh, go ahead, Warboss. I'll cut you off.
I was going to say, that's one of the things I talk about some of my videos, is when the normal person looks at a game of 40K and then they just see the stack of rule books sitting next to the models and going, oh, good Lord. It puts off a whole lot of people. I mean, some people don't even like to read, comic books, let alone rule books. They want to experience the fun, but they don't want it to be too much work to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so cool. Like, one-page rules is really something you could teach your friends a weekend, and like you could just bring some models up, maybe even skirmish, and just sort of play it almost like Catan was with board games, which I think is a great quality, Okay.
So last year, I introduced, maybe it was a couple years ago, in the same year, I introduced a couple friends to 40K because I was still playing it, and a couple friends to one-page rules. And it's fascinating. 2 of the guys I was introducing both have graduate degrees. Like these are intelligent people. And yet after 2 and 3 hours, they were still looking at the data slates for one of the units and be like, what does all this mean?
Yeah.
Whereas with one-page rules, you got your 2 stats at the top, you got a few special rules. Like it was just so much easier. And we spent most of the evening playing the game rather than trying to just learn to decode all of the data that's thrown at you at once. And then as far as kids go, that's a piece of cake. I mean, kids can count to 6. They can roll dice, do that. Very, very simple. Whereas I wouldn't have even thought of, a kid at 6 or 7 trying to teach them full 40K, I think you'd probably develop your own simpler version of it and give it to them. I think when I taught my son, we ignored all special rules. I just started with the stat line across the top. And that was all I expected of him. And then over time, we'd build up from there.
Yeah, and can you imagine those same players? You probably didn't even get to a real game. And what a real game of 40K is just getting out-stratagemed. I mean, really, that's what 40K has become for a while, probably since maybe 5th. 5th started to get a little crazy with 40K. But it's really, that's 40K now. It's all about just out-stratageming your opponent, right? Where the models just are sort of vessels. It's a lot more like War Machine. They're just vessels for your special abilities.
I've heard it that now with 10th edition, with stratagems and all the changes, it's like a 3D version of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Mm-hmm.
You've got so many things that you're layering this and setting up this, and then your opponent moves 1 inch, and then you go, aha, you've triggered, and boom, you wipe them off the table.
Yeah. Okay, so going through here, so Warboss did some great minis for 1 page more. Yeah, Warboss is just awesome. How about, so there's a true story. This Nega production says he started 3D printing, and when he realized he could legitimately get 2,000 points of 40K Leagues of Votan would cost him $800. Yeah, and like it's so true. It's like I'm actually trying to get a 3D printer myself. Where it's like, I think he was saying it's $44, and like it's so true. Like 3D printing, something like 1 page rules is where it's going, because, and even like Games Workshop itself, not only are they raising their prices, they're cutting back on production. I think they just realize that they are really only going to sell to a small group of people. And it's sort of like we're doing with diamonds, where they're increasing their prices, but they're also decreasing production, right? I mean, this is like, so yeah, I think that's, yeah. So the 3D printing side, go ahead.
Yeah, say for a video I got coming up, I just did my Giants video where, how to play Giants, and a painting video on them. I was looking for, just trying to figure out the names of the different Warhammer Giants, and I went on the Warhammer site, checked the models, and of course the prices are right next to them. I had to make sure that I didn't accidentally send it to Australia, because oh good God, one giant, $200 and something. Are you outside your mind? Absolutely insanity.
Yeah. But they can charge that because they're not producing. It's almost like they are really doing what the diamond producers, just limiting supply. And I
forgot which army it is, but someone did the numbers, and a 2,000 point army costs more than its own weight in silver. I can't remember which one that is, but one of them. It's an amazing stat.
But the funniest thing about that, though, is if you buy a box of GW models in the shrink wrap and never open it, you cannot sell it for even close to the price you bought it for, even if it's unopened. So that it's more like the secondhand market is what they actually should be selling for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, well, here's something. Test. So it's another thing he's talked about is actually the thing that I want to do sometimes is actually paper minis. How this person got a goblin army for $15, painted, really, and like I've been wanting to do that, where I can literally just print paper minis, just like 5 or 6 different armies, and just have like a little book and like actually start teaching people, because actually that is something so cool that like I had to get used to that as a hardcore, it's got to be miniatures, but actually it doesn't. So I love the paper miniatures thing. I would love for 1 page rule to put out like this could be a board game. I mean, it's, I don't know. I could imagine this easily turning into some sort of board game sort of set where, I mean, because that would be awesome. All right. What we have here, 7 who repeated, bounced off GW stuff, even though 7 minutes. What's this behind the lock? Oh, so I'm sorry. Most important rule. Yeah, I like that. Someone's mentioning that he likes OPR's most important rule, basically stating use common sense. And that is a really different paradigm shift from some of the GW, where a lot of GW stuff doesn't make sense. Like I tried to play 10th, where you had different models, or was it 9th, where at Grey Knight they were teleporting everywhere constantly or something. And I'm like, wait, that's just weird. I don't know. So
I feel like if 40K in the last 3 editions makes common sense to you, you've got a problem.
Yeah, their rules are written in some kind of British legalese that it takes some history degree to figure out what it is. And with OPR, whenever someone goes, well, what does the rule say? I'm like, just read the rule.
Mhm.
What do you mean? Just what do the words say? And that is the rule. There's no where's the comma? What particular point in the game is this that the rules do certain things? It's like, no, that's 2 sentences. That's the rule. That's the whole rule.
Yeah. I love how the biggest controversy, one of the biggest controversies in one-page rules for their rule set is the interpretation of blast.
Yeah.
Like, and just trying to figure out how does blast work, and it's just this one little rule, and it's, you know, they changed in the most recent update. They changed it from the max to up to the unit size.
Mhm.
If we had that level of scrutiny for 40K, entire lifetimes would be spent coming up with legal diatribes trying to dissect these rules.
I mean, the old world, Warhammer or whatever, read through those rules, and they're ridiculous. And it's so funny you mentioned legalese, Warwasp, because one of those spells is called conveyance. Conveyance is a legal term. It's like that is like the spells is their type conveyance. And I'm like, that is a legal term. Like, where does this even? Who is coming up with even these names? Like, you have to be like, like who uses the word conveyance? It's hilarious.
I used to know a guy. Well, I still know a guy who used to work for the Rules Boys for Games Workshop, and he would say that whenever you would get a phone call, because they had a hotline you could call in to ask how this rule works, he would get a phone call and someone would explain the rule to him, and then they would give their what that rule did, and then always 3 minutes later they'd get a phone call. You could tell it was from the guy's opponent asking the different wording of the same rule, and he would get a different answer, and you'd just hear the phone hang up and like, I told you, slam. And it's like the rules are just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the ways in which they kind of shot themselves in the foot is Games Workshop, at least to me, the rule design is driven by the competitive scene. Because the competitive scene is where people will spend a lot of money frequently, whatever the hot new meta is, buy an entire army of it. And because of that, the rules have to be more and more complex, more and more specific, more and more detailed. You can even see the wording and the language. It's no longer rules of a game. It really is legal writing. You'll see phrases like up to and including or stuff like that. And it's just, instead of stating the rule and when there's confusion, let the players discuss it. And when all else fails, roll a dice. On a 1, 2, 3, it's player A's way. 4, 5, 6 is player B's way. They have to clarify it down to the minutia because there are massive tournaments at stake. And so the game is driven by the tip-top complexity of it rather than being driven by the entry-level let's have fun of it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to give competitive gaming a bad name because I know from I came from the Kings of War sides of things with Mantic. Kings of War early edition second, it was very streamlined game, very easy, intuitive, but highly competitive. And I think that it's a different. For me, I think GW is a different sort of competitive where it's not a war game. It's like you said, it's a card game, and I don't know. Like they make it competitive because they make their models complex, and they make their models complex because they need to sell models. So it's all, I don't know. I don't. For me, I don't want to just. I don't like to criticize competitive play because I think that there's a lot of opportunity for OPR to be competitive.
I didn't mean to criticize the competitive scene. It's the difference between you and your friends going to the park just to play basketball, for some exercise versus the guys who go there every Wednesday night to play more seriously. It's totally fine if one group wants to play competitive, one group doesn't. But if the city only builds basketball courts where the competitive players want to play, then those who just want the casual are left out.
Yeah,
that's what I was meaning to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing too about the whole online community of Warhammer 40K is that it's completely driven by the competitive scene. So that's why, most people, that's all they see about 40K if they're looking to get into it or if they're already into it and you're searching YouTube. You either see lore videos or you see this is how this works, this new rule, new update, and it's it's part of what I like to call mission creep, because it's like Games Workshop made competitive rules, which were competitive 15 years ago. They were all right, but because they have to continuously churn out rules, they just keep getting more complicated and more complicated until what we have now, which is just a mess. And even in 10th edition, where they're like, it's going to be simple. Oh, good Lord, it is not. It is not. You've mission creeped within 2 years.
And someone actually mentioned that every 2 years, I think one of our users mentioned that they have to buy a book every two years and pay. And yeah, I think that there is an incentive. One, there's an incentive to make bad rules, because then you have a reason to sell chapter approved, and then you have a reason to make your new rules every year. I mean, like, this is what I'm saying too. OPR, as a competitive player for myself, one-page rules, there's a lot of competitive depth in the game. And while you can be a beer and pretzels player, and that's great, I think that if you really wanted to play at high level competitive, you could have a blast in this game, because it's very much that chess mechanic that I think really makes it work. I think that OPR, I don't like calling it a casual game, because I think it can really be a super competitive game. But it can also be played casually, and that's great.
Yeah. So one of the things that kind of back on the topic of how do we continue growing the community, there are players who want competitive, there's players who want casual. So throwing out one of those as good or bad kind of restricts the ability for the community to grow. And so really it comes down to the approach of how do we handle competitive. And one of the big things is the rule set should not be balanced for competitive, because that's not the majority of the players, and that's not the player base that one-page rules wants to bring in. So there leaves this room for there being either a secondary rule set that helps balance the game for competitive play, or there's just, narrative play. But one of the comments earlier on I saw, and I wish I remember or I could find it, was they brought up a good point of one of the best ways for us to grow the one-page rules community is to have events, not competitive events, just have good events. And that includes around model painting, narrative events, even competitive events overall, but giving people the opportunity to experience the game in all of its aspects in a community setting is really what's going to drive people forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think there can be room for competitive, but it doesn't need to be. We don't need to bog down the main community with it. And I think that's something that some of the work that I've been doing with others connecting is that there are people interested in competitive play. And it's sort of, my view is, let's just do our own thing, right? Let's do our own thing. Let's make our competitive. And that way you can be casual, you can be campaign, you can be competitive. And yeah, I love that. I love that someone else mentioned, Jamie mentioned that he's also teaching their son with dinosaurs, which I think is great. That I love that a lot of people can teach their children that, which is great. We got here. Luke, he played a game of Grimdark last week, had a lot of fun. Tons of players were real nice. That's great. Yeah, I love this too, that you can play some games pretty fast. I can in 3 or 4 hours, I can play 2 games, which I think is great.
Which is also, I ran a tournament, in a narrative-based tournament in December, and that aspect of the quick play was so vital for making the tournament easy to run. Because we set it up that you have a week to finish a round, and it was all online, and it made it easy for people to schedule time with each other because they only needed 2 hours to get everything going and playing. And so it took a massive administrative burden off of me in particular to running that because of how quickly the game played. And so that's a really important aspect too.
Yeah, and then once the community gets bigger, I can see us having like narrative style events, because right now, like we're to the point where yes, people want narrative style events, but they are a lot of work to pull off. So just like tables and event halls and things to do it in. Which one thing I would love to see us do is a narrative event, but it's going to take a minute to get there. So just because tournaments are easier to pull off, I know One Page Rules is having their first tournament, like you said, coming up in England. So that's I think is the first stepping stone to a larger, It's the first stepping stone to more events of different types.
Yeah.
If we can show how much variety can be had from a single game system, and not just the game, but the hobby. So you can bring in whatever models you want to buy from whatever company, or you can 3D print your own. You can play a small skirmish game. You could play a massive apocalypse size. You could do competitive. You could do narrative. The more we can show what One Page Rules has to offer, everyone will find something that they can enjoy in it. And then when they find out, they can enjoy that without having to spend more than maybe $5 for the advanced rule book. So I think the biggest thing is just getting word out there. There were a lot of people at the Richmond Open when I was there that they walk by and they're like, "What's One Page Rules?" They just don't know what it is. They've never heard of it.
Yeah. Well, I think the custom army builder, I think, is the key differentiator. Like, I just imagine this can be tailored scenarios that can be built. The great thing about that, you can make stuff that's super competitive, but you can also make stuff that's bonkers broken. It's one of those. That is so much great thing. Maybe this is a question for Warboss Fist, which is saying, could you imagine a whole army made of solid silver minis? Someone commented on
there was some mad lad out there who was actually casting Custodes in solid 24 karat gold. I don't know if he ever finished that, but I think at one point he said this might be cheaper than the actual models. So I just remember that popping up on a Reddit timeline like a year ago. So,
yeah, someone else mentioned a great way to grow is events. I'm going to try to run an event myself. And this is going back to the community. I think it isn't, whoever is watching this, hey, let's get out there. Let's start your own event. Talk to your local gaming store. Bring a few do something, and let's start our own events. I'm going to try it. I'm learning. This is my first event I've never run. So let's also get out there and let's try to put some events on ourselves as well.
My dream, which is so weird that I'm a lore channel, and would be my dream, would be having some sort of event circuit, either a competitive circuit or a narrative circuit of some sort, where people can create their own events, but they register it and they get a packet, and it shows who's running what event where, and being able to do that would be really awesome, especially if there was some sort of global ranking around who had the best army or who was the best commander or whatever. That would be really fun for me in particular. So probably a bad idea, but I still love my bad idea.
I love the idea. We're trying to do it. I mean, it's in the works, but we're trying. Yeah. We've got SoCal. So I know some people on my channel, they're in SoCal. They are trying to put together, they're taking the custom armies that I've been working on, and a few others, and they're going to try and run these in a tournament, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to be like, okay, how did these actually work? So yeah. Someone did comment. This is something Master William commented. He wished special rules all have the same name, and I do sort of agree there. I would. Yeah, I would. I don't feel every army needs their own naming of the special. I'd love them all to just be the same rules, but yeah.
A lot of it is just to do with the lore or the fluff of an army. Like I just did the unit parts for how to play on the alien hives, and a lot of their rules just come from other places that I've seen them, just the new name, but with the new name with the alien hives, it just makes thematic sense. And they have two rules that are the same rule that are literally right next to each other on the special rules block that have two separate names. It's like, okay.
I got it. Someone did mention myself that I act as an authority on game balance, and that's not good, I guess. So for me, it's funny. Like, I don't consider myself to be an authority. It's like, I've kind of said it before. I would love for other people to talk about game balance, it just, I feel like I'm the only one doing it. So I just put out stuff. I don't, it's funny to me that it's strange to me that somehow I'm viewed as an authority on anything. I'm just like all of us, I'm just a guy who just puts out content. I hope, if it's good, it's good, but I can understand. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just, I guess I'm just trying to say that. Yeah.
I am.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. So
yeah, at the end of the day, I like with me, people go, "Oh my God, you're so great." I'm like, I'm just a dude that is rolling dice in his garage. I just happen to turn the camera on. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing, not to jump ahead of you, but someone had a bad idea garage to saying, give us an example of a narrative event. We all know what a competitive event looks like, tournament, brackets, so on and so forth. Before, let's see, this is probably 6 years ago, when 30K, when Horus Heresy was still pretty much just a Forge World only, or when they just released the Betrayal at Kaufbox, there was a small community here, and someone actually created a small solar system. It only had, I think, 3 or 4 planets and a moon. And then they had that in the center of the big room where everyone was playing. And then each of the tables was set up with the terrain and a gaming mat that matched one of those planets. So one was volcanic, one was ice, one was, a habitable planet. And as you played games on them, you actually marked territory. It's almost like if any of you guys play Helldivers, like as you play the games, it affected the overall map. And so it wasn't necessarily about, can you beat every other player? It's can your faction conquer this planet after 3 or 4 battles, or do more of the games win for, the robot legions, and therefore they kicked out the high elf fleets or something. And so you could still have the games were balanced in that regard. All the armies had went according to the Army Forge, the rules, the point system, but it was narratively driven. Or you could have a narrative event that throws balance right out the window, and instead you have 2 or 3 people playing Titan legions stomping through a city, and then everyone else is just seeing how many bodies does it take to finally bring those down, or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's is cool. So give us an example of a narrative event. Something that I want to play in is Warboss Fitz is doing. Warboss, tell us about it's something I'm following it. I want to try and get a game in for it. Tell us about your campaign that you're doing.
Yeah, it's just an idea I came up with, that we are running a channel-wide campaign. Again, I released those videos on a Wednesday, and it is the campaign in Age of Fantasy for humans versus the armies of Havoc, and there's a whole lot of other armies thrown in there. I have kind of hard to explain this, but I have 2 guys that are the war masters of each army, one for the humans, one for Havoc. And they are moving their stuff in the background on the campaign map that not everyone gets to see, because both my war masters watch the videos, and I don't want to give away intel to the other side. And I'm just playing as the referee. And I have people in my community, in my Discord, and they can email me games that will affect the way the games go. And then we do 1 game on the board every week, so I can show off to everybody. And then there's the community game that is affected by them. And then, yeah, it's going really well. Whole lot of fun. And we'll just have to see where that turns out, because I'm planning on getting that done by about Christmas, because we're on a 3-week rotation. So that gives us, like, I don't know, 12, 13 more turns on the campaign.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna try to get in at least 1 game. Well, we'd love to talk about this all day. I know we've all got our lives. So maybe we can all finish off the conversation. Warboss, give us each, let's all give maybe 1 tip about how we think we can grow the community. And then we'll sort of close this off. Thanks everyone for your time. Warboss, what's your thought? Tip of the day.
How to grow the community? Well, reach out to the 40K players. They're going to be the ones that have the most, wargaming experience with it. But mostly just introduce it to other people. A lot of people that just saw the cost of Games Workshop games and decided that it's not for them. Show them how easy it is to get into one-page rules, that the cost to get into it is negligible at most, and just breed more wargamers that way, because I just want to see more people playing games, period. I want to see more painted models. I want to see more people throwing dice, having fun.
That's right. That's right. I do have to comment. Diego said he has to say that Ear Boss and Chris are the reason he plays OPR today. So Ear Boss and Chris. Thank you.
Well, you're the reason I make the videos, so it works out.
Yeah, that's awesome. One page more. What's your tip for the community?
So for me, I feel like I have to do it from like a lore standpoint, because you guys got the rest of the hobby covered. Write lore for your armies.
Yeah.
Because it's going to make you love what you're doing even more. But that's kind of a game agnostic thing. I just want people to enjoy what they're doing, to put thought into what they're doing. So that way, when they talk to other people, they have a basis of passion in which they can communicate with. And so if you're passionate about your army, you're more likely to share it too and bring more people into it. And so just write lore for your armies, write stories, have fun with it. So that way other people can see you having fun and want to join.
That's great. And that's what makes the custom army builder so great. Like you can, yeah. And I have people, I see them post all the time in the Discord and other places about this awesome army that, yeah, they just created.
So I got a train rolling by. I don't know if you guys can hear it.
You're good. You're good. Okay. All right, Chris, one tip for us to grow.
I would say, kind of building off what Fitz said, is while we are going to catch a lot of people that fall through the Games Workshop, the cracks in the floor, let's make sure that we push OPR for what it is, and that we don't focus on, like, it's not supposed to be your rebound girlfriend or boyfriend, so to speak. You're leaving that. We want you to try something new, not just because it's not that. So as you're introducing people to it, show it for what it is. Focus on the positive aspects of it. Don't harp on turning it into a we hate GW fest, because eventually that might wear off, and then, where's the interest? Is like the game for what it is, like the hobby for what it is, and then you'll always want to stay in it.
Yeah. Yeah, like for me, I think the biggest thing is OPR is, like, I love it. It's an open plate, and you can, I would say, pursue your passion in wargaming. For myself, I pursue more of the competitive side because it's something I like. And I see, like I always say, I see OPR as a big tent where we all can pursue, like, we've got lore, we've got just fun games. And I myself am pursuing the competitive side, but I think we should all take the view that, to not sort of push that on the greater community. For me, I'm not trying to, take some of the thoughts I have about competitive play and so, well, everyone has to do this. I'm just sort of, saying, hey, this is sort of a little corner that we'd like to work on. And if you're interested in competitive play, great. If not, hey, play some fun games. I'll play fun games with you as well. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Let's just close out with just some little sneak peeks about what, sort of what you have going on in the future. So, Mr. Warboss.
Come back to me. I got visual aids.
Mr. One Page More, what you got coming for us?
Well, I'm working on a video with Warboss to cover the army and the lore I'm making for the army he sent me, which is coming along nicely. And I'm also working on a worksheet with like a guide to help people write lore for their own armies. So I'm excited for both of those.
Very nice. Very nice. Good. Chris, what's coming down the pipe for you?
So 2 videos I did that I thought would be just kind of throwaway turned out to be super popular. When I showed off the 3D printed dwarves I had, and then the army showcase at the end. And those got such a big reception that I got a new project. I'm not going to spill too many beans about it, but I got a specific army with a specific aesthetic in mind to build towards one of my sandbox narrative battle reports, hopefully near the end of summer.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Well, myself, so I'm gonna be heading up to England. I'm gonna be playing in that first. I want to support the, I want to hang out with Boz, Andy, and Ed. I'm friends with those guys. So we'll be hanging out. Gonna see how I do in the competitive scene over there. Time for me to put my money where my mouth is. But no, for myself, really have a growing competitive scene. We're starting to actually put together sort of a list of what we would do as a competitive scene. And so that's we have some tournaments coming up. We've got some other competitive corners coming up. So yeah, there's a lot of good things happening over there. I did have I'll close up with this. Someone did mention they have a selfish question about an up and coming YouTuber. They would like to delve into making wargaming videos. What suggestions? I would just say for myself, just start doing it. My first video sucked, and I'm trying my best to learn new software, and I'm like, just get a little better each time, because like I'm just learning this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of my first videos, I kept them up there, but man, they are rough. But yeah, what I've got going on, because I don't work that far in the future, because everything I work on, I'm done with, and I throw it out there. So I have Alien Hives coming next weekend. I have a revamped GW versus OPR. I explain why I did it. And then after that, we are going to the Havoc Warriors.
Oh, that's cool.
And because I got a vacation coming up that I'm trying to preload a whole bunch of stuff so I don't have to worry about it.
That's awesome. And I know of a few we didn't get them on, but even like we started this, there was a few people who were already OPR creators who were already growing. We didn't get a chance to get them on. But like, start your own channels, one thing I'll say in my channels, if is we need more conversation. We need more voices in the community. And I think that's going to help grow things as well. So anyone on this channel, we got one person already. Let's grow some OPR. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it. Thank you all.